Out there, beyond the last paved road, where the stars don't blink through city haze and the silence presses in too close, something waits. It's not just animals or weather or the creak of old trees. It's the unknown, and sometimes it reaches back. The wilderness is always whispered to those who listen. But what if the whispers turn into pounding? What if the stars above you aren't stars at all? Tonight, we're exploring two true accounts of terror in the wild. One from the dense forests of Maine, where four men vanished into light and came back broken, haunted by memories they never spoke aloud. And another from the alpine stillness of Australia, where a solo camper faced a night so chilling the footage still sparks debate. If you think you're ready to hear what really happens when the forest breathes back, then let's begin. The Allagash abductions, light over Eagle Lake. Four men, a canoe, a fire that should have kept burning, and a night that refuses to fade even decades later. In August of 1976, deep in the remote northern woods of Maine, four college friends set out on what they hoped would be a quiet, soul-refreshing retreat. Jack Weiner and his twin brother Jim, their friends Charlie Foltz and Chuck Rock, artists, outdoorsmen, seekers of silence and stillness. They paddled into the wilderness, slicing through the dark waters of the Allagash waterway in canoes, surrounded by the thick hush of pine and spruce. Their days were filled with fishing and laughter. Their nights under a sky full of stars were supposed to be for sleep, stories, and the kind of peace you only find far from civilization. But 2 nights in, something changed. It was Jim who first saw the light. Hovering, still, too bright for a star, too steady for a plane. It didn't flicker, it didn't drift, it just hung there above the treetops like it had been waiting. Jim lifted a pair of binoculars to his face and focused on the object. But before he could make out any more detail, the light simply collapsed. Not faded, not shot away. It shrank in on itself, disappearing from the edges, leaving behind only questions. No one spoke about it much that night. They were in the wild. Lights can play tricks, right? Still, none of them shook the feeling. 2 nights later, they reached Eagle Lake, a wider, colder stretch of water nestled in the deepest part of the park. They built a large bonfire on the shore, just as they'd done before, a beacon to mark their camp. As the fire crackled and the trees whispered in the wind, they pushed a canoe out into the lake, drifting into black water under a vault of stars. It should have been a quiet ride, but the light returned. At first, it hovered far away, a faint, distant glow. Then it began to move. It grew larger, brighter, more vivid. It wasn't just white now. It pulsed with deep reds and alien greens, shifting, expanding, alive with motion. The forest lit up like it was midday. The canoe rocked gently in the lake's grip, the water reflecting colors no campfire could ever make. And then it responded. Chuck Rock would later say he felt something, or someone, watching, the way you feel eyes on your back before you turn. When he turned, the light turned too. A beam shot out from the object. Not a casual sweep, not a searchlight. It opened with intention, a cone of brightness that reached down and swept across the surface of the lake and over their canoe. Panicked, they flashed their flashlight back. An SOS pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. No reply. Just that beam, silently tracking them, not searching, fixing. Then, everything fractured. The next thing they remember, they were on shore. The fire had burned down to near embers. Not minutes later, hours, as if time had simply jumped forward, like they'd been plucked from it. None of them said much. They packed up camp the next day and went home. But in the weeks that followed, strange things began to happen. Vivid dreams and nightmares that all four shared but never told each other. Not right away. Jim Weiner would be the first to break. His dreams were filled with cold white light, narrow metallic rooms, tables, instruments, beings, silent and strange with large heads and enormous dark eyes. He wasn't alone in those dreams. The others were there too, naked, still, and examined. And the dreams didn't fade. They grew and sharpened until they began to feel like something remembered, not imagined. In 1988, 12 years later, Jim reached out to Raymond Fowler, a UFO researcher. Fowler listened, then arranged for each man to undergo hypnosis separately. The results were staggering. Each recalled the same things: the same table, the same beings, the same metallic interior, same procedures, skin samples, and needles. The feeling of being held down, not by hands, but by some invisible force. No screaming and no pain, just paralysis and dread. They each drew what they saw: the same faces, the same craft, details no one had discussed aloud. Skeptics, of course, came forward. They pointed to hypnosis as unreliable, memory contamination, media influence. Maybe they'd watched the same films. Maybe it was group hysteria. But the polygraph suggested otherwise. Each man passed, and none of them had much to gain. There was no money in their story, only the weight of it. Years later, Chuck Rock would distance himself from the abduction aspect. He said the light was real, the fire was real, but he no longer trusted the rest. The others, they remained firm. They remember what they remember. They live with it still. Because what haunts most about the Allagash case isn't the lights in the trees or the time that vanished. It's the idea that the wilderness, so vast and so empty, might not be empty at all. That something can find you and take you and return you changed. And that it won't leave proof, only memory and the silence that follows. Solo camping horror in the wilderness. Kristen's night in Kosciuszko. Kristen had always found comfort in the quiet of the wilderness, the kind of silence that stretches between trees, settles into moss, and fills your lungs like cold mountain air. That night, she wasn't looking for danger or drama, just stillness, maybe even clarity. She set up her solo camp in the middle of Kosciuszko National Park, far from trailheads, phone reception, or the hum of passing cars. Her gear was packed with care. She had a tarp, a tent, some food, a headlamp, and her phone, mostly used as a camera. She lit a small fire before dusk, letting it die out as the stars blinked into view, then zipped herself into the thin walls of her tent for the night. She was used to the creaks and sighs of the forest, used to the wind, used to the night playing tricks. But what she wasn't used to was what happened next. At first, the sounds outside were gentle, almost rhythmic, like the light brushing of leaves or the restless shifting of a breeze, the kind of ambient noise you expect in a national park. Then, without warning, something slammed against the side of her tent. It wasn't the slow groan of wind or the twitch of a tree branch. It had an impact. Blunt, forceful, personal. She froze, then listened and waited. The fabric trembled. The tent poles flexed. Something outside was shaking the tent so violently that the seams creaked and the air inside seemed to pulse with pressure. Kristen's breath caught in her throat. She lay flat, motionless, hands gripped over her ears like they could muffle the chaos or the fear. Her heartbeat pounded in her neck. Her first thought, it had to be the wind. Just wind, a storm rolling through. But as the seconds dragged on, the shaking didn't fade. It got worse, more erratic, less like weather, more like intention. She whispered, "Is someone there?" The question dissolved into the darkness. No footsteps and no voice. Just the constant violent thrashing of fabric. And beneath that, a silence that felt colder than the night air. Kind of silence that listens. Kristen reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she opened the camera and pressed record. If anything happened to her, this video might be the only evidence. The screen lit her face in a pale blue hue, catching the shadows dancing wildly against the thin canvas wall. Outside, shapes moved, but they were vague. Branches bending, something pacing, or nothing at all. The air smelled like damp soil and pine bark. Not rot, not blood, but still, something in the scent made her stomach tighten. It felt like the moment before a lightning strike, when everything goes still and heavy. She thought of animals, dingoes maybe, but they were rare in that region now, nearly wiped out. Besides, what animal shakes a tent for minutes on end without leaving a mark? Social media later exploded with theories. It's wind, it's wildlife, it's nerves. Some laughed, some shared their own stories, nights where things outside tents didn't make sense either. But no one could agree on what Kristen's video showed, because it didn't show a face, or a paw, or claws. Just canvas snapping and jerking like it was fighting something unseen. When morning finally arrived, it was a pale, thin kind of light. Kristen stepped outside, boots crunching over damp earth, and saw nothing. No tracks, no shredded food bag, and no animal hair. Just a few disturbed leaves and a broken twig near the tent's edge. That's when it hit her. Whatever or whoever was out there didn't want to be seen. She later said that the worst part wasn't the shaking, it was the doubt. The way your mind spins in the dark, flipping through every horror story you've ever heard, every crime podcast, every missing hiker thread, and worse, the fear that maybe no one would believe her. But they did, at least some did. Others said it was just wind, she was overreacting. But Kristen trusted herself. It wasn't a dream, she wrote. It wasn't the breeze. Something was out there. What haunted her wasn't proof. It was the absence of it, the lack of evidence, the fact that she may never know what stood on the other side of that nylon wall, pushing in, testing her fear, then vanishing without a trace. Because sometimes, scariest thing about the wilderness is not the howling or the claw marks or the darkness. It's the idea that something found you, chose to leave you alone. This time. The wilderness feels infinite. Millions of trees, billions of stars, unmapped valleys, silent lakes, and paths that vanish without a trace. And in all that space, sometimes something moves. Maybe it's the wind, or a bear, or a dream too vivid to forget. But sometimes it's not. What's chilling about these stories isn't just what happened, it's what didn't. No claw marks, no broken cameras, no clear answers. Just fear and doubt and a silence that doesn't feel empty. Each person came back with more questions than proof. And what unsettles us isn't monsters or aliens or strangers. It's the not knowing. The moment you realize you're not the only thing breathing out there. Because the scariest part of the woods isn't getting lost. It's being found by something you can't explain. And walking away with nothing but a feeling that changes you and never quite fades. That stays long after you've packed your tent and hiked back to the safety of signal bars and pavement. And maybe, next time you're out there, you'll listen just a little harder when the wind shifts. Because sometimes the forest listens back. Thank you for watching. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something, and if you want more stories that don't always have answers, don't forget to subscribe because the next mystery might already be waiting in the woods.